Dumb, cool,
weird
podcast. So, gentlemen, today we're talking about horror movies from our childhoods. Like, we're talking for me and Nick, it'd probably be like stuff from the 90s and 80s and 70s. And Scott, what would that be for you?
Probably 50s, early 60s. Mine would be all black and white. The black and white classics.
Yeah.
Nice.
Like anything from Bela Lugosi?
Bela Lugosi, Karloff, and of course Vincent Price. Anything with Vincent Price.
So Nick is a very big Vincent Price fan.
Yeah, I love Vincent Price's movies.
Good taste.
The man is entertaining.
Absolutely.
Oh, very.
Yeah.
We still got to finish watching the Girl Bombs.
Yeah.
The who?
Goldfoot and the Girl Bombs. It's kind of like a...
Yeah, Dr. Goldfoot and the Bikini Machine. It was like the one we watched.
Oh, yeah.
That was a great one.
That's good stuff.
We watched a few of them, like the Tingler.
Yeah, we've seen the Bat, the Tingler. We've also seen the Pit and the Pendulum. We've also seen House of Usher, stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
The Pit and the Pendulum is great.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so folks, as you know, we're kind of coming up on October, and October is when me and Nick usually do a lot of horror movies for the month of Halloween. So, you know, we're kind of just doing like a preemptive, like, kind of talk about stuff like that. And so, you know, we wanted to bring Scott in because Scott's a baby boomer. He's 70, and, you know, he's from that time period of old school classic golden age horror from like the, you know, mid 20th century. And me and Nick are kind of coming from like a, you know, 80s and 90s kind of perspective, you know, because we usually do movies before the year 2000. So,
well, back then, you know, my style of the old horror movies, that's where they left a lot more to your imagination, which can really be intense sometimes. Now, in my opinion, they rely too much on the special effects and all the graphic gore to make the movies, and it doesn't feel the same.
Absolutely,
your imagination can really kick in and do a number on you.
Yeah,
like what they did with the very first Alien movie. What really made that, they didn't really show the alien very much. Yeah, you had
but
all
you
that
saw it
stuff,
stalking you. But you saw it stalking you, though. You saw
you saw little glimpses, but you didn't see the whole thing until toward the end. So you're like, is that it? Oh my God! You know, so your imagination is really, you know, taking you through that movie and really getting you to feel it more.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Yeah. It does so much more for you than just all the open gore.
I mean, that's good though. I mean, you know, one of the things that's really important to me, you know, when watching a movie is, you know, it's the same thing that always goes with every movie. It's like, you know, you show but you don't tell, you know?
Yeah.
That's important.
Yep.
And I think a good movie too that I've still wanted to see is Night of the Living Dead, the original from 1960. Yeah, because from little cut scenes that I've seen here and there, like shorts that people put together, they do leave a lot more to the imagination on how the virus started, how people were handling it, and you know, it just kind of leaves it open ended. And obviously, it goes 10 years later into Dawn of the Dead, and then 10 years later from that, you get Day of the Dead.
Yeah.
Well, it's like 10 years later. It's like 5 or 6 years later into Day of the Dead.
Yeah, that is true. That's true. Because was that like 83?
78, 79 is when Dawn of the Dead came out.
Yeah.
So 78, I think, is when it came out, and 68 is when Night of the Living Dead came out.
Yep.
Okay.
And we didn't get Land of the Dead until 2005, so that's a big gap between Day of the Dead and Land of the Dead. So So Land of the Dead is technically after everything has gone down and the world's gone to shit, and humans have basically built like a settlement. That's from, you know, Land of the Dead. So
Yeah, no, Land of the Dead felt like the weakest of all the films.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Land of the Dead's not really a very good flick, but me and my buddies really liked it back in the day, so we kind of went with it. You know, one of my favorite movies of all time is obviously Day of the Dead. So me and Nick, what we're trying to do is we're trying to find like what we're gonna do this month, and maybe a good idea is maybe we should do a Dead marathon. Maybe we should do Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead.
Yep,
And
There you go.
absolutely.
yeah, and then maybe we should finish it off with I hate to say it, maybe Land of the Dead, even though it's outside of the wheelhouse of what we usually do. But maybe that'll be like a good 4-movie progression, you know, for this type of thing. I mean, maybe we could do Night of the Living Dead, you know, Dawn of the Dead, and then Day of the Dead, and maybe we could do Return of the Living Dead, even though it's not a part of it. But there was a time back then where they said that
was great.
Return of the Living Dead was like a part of the series. At least they talked about it. So maybe we should just do that. Maybe we should do those 4 movies.
So in what was it? You said what was the last one you said? It was Night of the Living Dead, where they eat the brains.
No, that's Return of the Living Dead. Return.
Yeah, Return of the Living Dead. Yeah, they mentioned the Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead movies at the beginning.
Yeah.
As like as movies that are canon within their universe.
But George A. Romero had nothing to do with Return of the Living Dead. That was a totally different production company and a totally different like production staff. So,
but I thought it was funny when they're like, when that zombie came back at the beginning and they're like, oh, what should we do? Well, in the movies, they always like destroy the brain or remove the head. And then they tried it and all it did was just start screaming worse.
Yeah.
I think that was a great film.
So maybe we'll do that for this month. What do you think, Scott? Do you think that'd be a good series to do for this month?
Yeah, that would be.
Yeah.
That would be. Yeah, I think it's a little too new, but I think probably the best movie to finish off something like that, even though it doesn't fit time-wise, is the latest one with Brad Pitt. What was that? World War Z.
World War Z.
Yeah, World War Z.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean those zombies in that, it were just taking off like a mound of fire ants after everything. I thought that was pretty intense.
You know, there was a movie series called 28 Days Later, and it's kind of like that too.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they kind of
I love this one.
Yeah, they kind of move like that too. So Scott,
That was good.
Scott, what would you say is your favorite old school horror movie of all time? Like from back in the day, like before the 60s. Let's say like anywhere from 1930 all the way up to like 1960. What would you say is your favorite in that time period?
Oh, just my very favorite, the basic classics, Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Boris Karloff. And then
Yeah,
Lon Chaney Jr. for Wolfman. Lon Chaney Jr. is pretty good.
Yeah. And shoot, I can't think of the actor's name now, but there was one actor that played the Frankenstein monster.
Boris Karloff.
No, not Boris Karloff. This guy had an even more classic look than Boris Karloff.
Was it from was it the Hammer films with
Yeah.
with Christopher Lee played Dracula, and then I don't know who. I mean, so in the Hammer films that did those movies, that was the 60s to the 70s. So that was Christopher Lee. That was the guy that played in the first Star Wars movie. He played Marv Tarkin. I'm trying to remember the name of that actor. Nick, help me out here. What was Peter Cushing? Peter Cushing.
Yeah.
Yeah, Peter.
That was him.
So Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee, and I don't know who else was in those monster movies from the Hammer films. Those are all like British films. So the British people did remakes of the classic monster movies from the 30s and 40s, and they did it during the 60s and 70s. And I couldn't really tell you who played Frankenstein offhand because, first of all, I don't have my phone in front of me, so I can't really tell you. But I think I know what Scott's talking about, I believe.
The actor who played the Frankenstein monster in movies like Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
Okay.
That's a fun movie, but that Frankenstein had the really coolest look.
Yeah, so it was like the best. So you say it was even better than the Boris Karloff look.
Yeah, He had, more of the classic, when you see pictures of Frankenstein, it was more of that look.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense. So, yeah, so you were a big fan of Frankenstein then.
Oh, yeah. Back when I was a kid, I was 10 years old. My favorite magazine then was Famous Monsters magazine.
Okay.
I used to get that all the time. Love that. And I drew a picture of Frankenstein that I sent into the magazine. They published it.
Oh, nice.
Awesome.
Yeah, that was cool. My first published works. How about that?
Yeah, I would
Pretty
say,
awesome.
yeah, Frankenstein is a pretty, I mean, I never was a big fan of the Frankenstein movies, like the Frankenstein's monster movies. I mean, it's pretty cool. So like Frankenstein was written, most people don't know this, but Frankenstein was like the whole Frankenstein book was written by Mary Shelley, who was actually a woman, and she was actually credited as one of the very first science fiction horror writers of all time,
Yep.
And
before Edgar Allan Poe even.
yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. And it's a woman that did it. So,
Yeah.
the wokies that are watching this, there you go. There's something y'all can run with.
Yeah, you should look up the story of how she did manage to get that published with her as having credit. That was quite a battle, and she did really good to get credit for that. She almost didn't. So.
Cool. I like that. I dig that. Nick, what is your favorite horror movie of all time? Like from like the 80s or 70s?
So from the 70s, I really like the Dawn of the Dead film. Dawn of the Dead was one of those things that, really kickstarted. I really think the Dead series really kicked off the whole zombie genre, obviously. And what I liked about it was that collapse of society. Not only are you worried about the dead, but now you're also worried about the living who are trying to take all your resources. And you're kind of going in between this different kind of battle of dealing with the remaining survivors from the old world and trying to live in this new world where the dead walk and devour your flesh.
Gotcha. Yeah. My favorite horror movie of all time is the Day of the Dead movie from 1985. And that kind of continues the series. And what I really like about that movie is it kind of shows the aftermath of the outbreak and how everybody's dead. And really, that was the first zombie movie that really showed, more about the humans and how how human beings are kind of coping with everything that's going on. I mean, Dawn of the Dead kind of touched on it a little bit when they were in the shopping mall.
Yeah.
But I feel like Day of the Dead really explored how everybody was starting to lose their minds and people were kind of grasping for more power in that movie.
Oh, yeah.
And
I mean, they had dwindling resources too.
Yeah, and the thing is in an age now where we have like The Walking Dead, right? The Walking Dead kind of touches on those subjects, and the thing is a lot of people who, if you're watching this and you're Gen Z and younger, you have no idea that what you're watching in Walking Dead has been covered in Day of the Dead in detail. This whole concept of and this whole concept of, oh well, we're trying to fight for power. That's been done already. Go watch go watch the Romero movies and you'll see the progression of that,
Romero started it all. He deserves a lot of credit.
No, he really does.
I like how he kind of described how he got that cameo in the Nazi zombie game when they had those zombie campaigns. And he was talking about the fact that he liked his creation of the zombie genre because it was kind of like the blue collar horror film. Kind of had to work a little harder. Had to open up different avenues. And I was like, yeah, that is very true. There's not just one big bad that you have to face in those movies. You got to face like so much more. You have so many other things coming to get you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mentally, it's kind of like one of those things that really kind of scares you because, like, yeah, if there's like an undead horde, you're like, crap, I got to deal with that. And then you got to worry about a group of bikers breaking into the shopping mall you confiscated.
Yeah.
Well, to ask you guys,
let you guys in.
So I ask you guys this: what kind of to wrap up the podcast, what would you guys like to see from future horror movies that are modern that kind of have like a callback to old school horror movies that you would like to see that kind of I don't know, kind of, that kind of made like old school horror movies really good. What is a callback that you guys would like to see that kind of like trigger people and make them think, like kind of make them, I don't know, kind of appreciate horror movies again?
I think going back to leaving more to the imagination.
Yeah, so
would be,
basically show don't tell. Basically like show.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah, okay.
For sure.
What do you think, Nick?
Shoot. Show, like definitely I want more imagination. I also want some more originality. I want them to stop like revamping old horror movies and bringing them back with
So
just
new
a slightly
stories.
different story.
You want new
New
stories.
stories.
New stories.
I want some new original ideas.
What I want is I want less CGI and more practical effects because it looked more
Yeah,
realistic.
that would be great.
Because I feel
Exactly.
like in the modern age, one of the things that's kind of annoying is we kind of rely too heavily on, those CGI effects, and we need to rely a little bit more on practical effects because there's so many great makeup effects artists out there,
Right.
Oh yeah.
So that would be
We can,
yeah.
thank Rick Baker for his outstanding makeup work to elevate, what they did with some of those creatures.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like, as a final conclusion for this, I feel like, we talk about different types of movies from different time periods. What would y'all say is the timeline for? So we talk about the Golden Age, Silver Age, and Bronze Age for like, horror movies, and let's kind of wrap this up. But what would you say was the Golden Age for horror, Scott?
Golden age for horror?
Yeah.
Probably the 60s.
Yeah.
Again, because the way they really got your imagination working. It's like, oh, what's coming?
So Hitchcock. Hitchcock was a good
that?
example, right?
Hitchcock was awesome. Yes, Hitchcock was awesome. And then it went into people like Spielberg. Did a good job with some of his
Jaws.
Yeah, Jaws.
So would you say that?
Was it Spielberg that did that Creep Show series? That movie, was that Spielberg?
No, that was part Stephen King. But I think one of the greats kind of directed or produced it. I think it might have either been John Carpenter or Wes Craven. I don't remember.
Yeah, that was really good in the 80s. That had some really good stories.
So would you say that the 60s through the 70s are probably a golden age for horror? Would you say that the 80s were a silver age for horror?
I'd say so, yeah.
What would you consider the Bronze Age, like the 90s?
Yeah, probably.
Okay. So then now leading through the 2000s up to now, I feel like, this is my opinion, but I feel like horror has been kind of stale. I mean, there's been a few cool movies that I liked. Like, for instance, I liked the Jeepers Creepers movie series. They were.
Oh yeah, that's good.
That was pretty good. I kind of like Scream. I feel like Scream was a really good, and that was Wes Craven, the same guy that created Nightmare on Elm Street, and Friday the 13th and all that. But the thing is, I feel like Wes Craven kind of brought modern slasher flicks with that one. So a lot of modern movies, when it comes to that, they've kind of tapped into the old school adage. Like, so basically like Eli Roth and the guys that created, so like you had Hostel and you had movies like, Saw,
Green Inferno.
Green Inferno, like Saw. So they were kind of tapping into the old school 60s and 70s, torture porn, exploitation flicks from that time period where you saw people getting tortured to death. But now I feel like horror movies now have become very stale, and I wonder where it's going to go in the future,
Yeah, you're right. I agree.
So,
too much of the same old gore, it seems.
Yeah, so we need something different, something new to kind of like scare people. And you're right, we live in an age where it's kind of all stale, and it's kind of like been the same type of thing going forward. Just to kind of wrap things up, is there any final comments you guys have about kind of how things are now?
Again, too much of the special effects and gore, to keep me interested anymore.
they need better writing for a lot of their films, not just the horror genre, but there's been a lot of films that
you got to have more surprises. Something to get you jumping up out of your seat. So
something that makes you also want to go to the theater. There's not. I don't think there's enough original ideas. I don't think there's enough good storytelling anymore. It's just very much like kind of they're running it by the numbers. Each film, it's kind of predictable now.
I think a really good example would be the original House on Haunted Hill with Vincent Price versus the one they made in 1999. So the original House on Haunted Hill, the movie ends with it being very ambiguous whether or not it was haunted or not. But the remake made it very clear from the beginning that it was haunted. And honestly, I like the original because it was left up for you to decide. If that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. The haunting was also very good.
Yeah, it was ambiguous. It was
haunting.
It was ambiguous.
Even the remake was decent.
Yeah. It was ambiguous. It was very ambiguous what was going on in the original one, and I think that was definitely like a very cool aspect of the old school horror films from the '60s. Is that you just had no idea whether this was actually happening to this character or if it was all in their head.
Right.
So,
like American Psycho.
Yeah, American Psycho. Yeah, American Psycho is a good example of that. But yeah, so that is this segment. We were just talking about, horror movies that kind of inspired us, kind of, the past, the present, future, and it's a Dumb, Cool, Weird podcast, and I appreciate everybody being here today.
All right, man.
All right.
You want to sign?
Take care.
Yeah. Sign us out,
You
Nick.
too.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Stay sexy, Atlanta.
Thanks for checking out the Dumb, Cool, Weird podcast. We're a movie podcast now, so Movie Monday is every Monday about crappy movies from the 20th century. It's going to be great, folks. I can't wait to show y'all.